The basement door was locked from the inside. Darnell Washington stood at the top of the stairs in his own house feeling like an intruder.
Where are you?
His chest was tight. His palms were sweating. The digital clock on the microwave behind him glowed 1:47 in the morning. Downstairs he could hear sounds. Rhythmic sounds. Metal against stone. Something scraping. Something being shaped. And underneath it all, soft music. The kind of slow R&B his wife always played when she was deep in thought. His wife. Keisha. The woman he'd shared a bed with for 10 years. The woman who'd stood by his side through job losses, family funerals, and everything in between. That woman was on the other side of this locked door, in their basement, in the middle of the night. For the 6th week in a row, Darnell knocked. The sound stopped immediately. Keisha. His voice came out rougher than he intended. Footsteps. Quick, almost panicked. Then his wife's voice through the door. Baby, what are you doing up? Looking for my wife. Since she's not in our bed, again. Silence. Darnell pressed his forehead against the door. He could feel the cool wood against his skin, could smell sawdust and something else, something chemical, like clay or plaster. Keisha opened the door. I can't right now. You can't or you won't. Darnell, please. Her voice cracked. Just go back to bed. I'll be up in an hour or so. An hour? He laughed bitterly. You've been saying that for 6 weeks. 6 weeks, Keisha. You think I haven't noticed. You think I've been sleeping through you sneaking out every single night. More silence. Longer this time. When Keisha spoke again, she sounded like she was crying. I know how this looks. I know you must be thinking terrible things. But I promise you, Darnell, I promise on everything we've built together. This is not what you think. Then tell me what it is. I'm not ready. Ready for what? His voice rose despite himself. What could you possibly be doing in our basement every night that you can't tell your own husband about? Something important. Something I need to finish before I can explain. Darnell's hands curled into fists at his sides. He was a patient man. You had to be patient to survive in construction. Delays, setbacks, problems that seemed impossible until you worked through them one step at a time. But this wasn't a construction project. This was his marriage, his life. His heart. Much longer, he finally asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3. 3 more weeks of this, 3 more weeks of you disappearing, of locked doors and secrets. Please, Darnell. Keisha's voice broke completely. I'm begging you, trust me just a little bit longer. What I'm working on, it's for us, for our future. You'll understand everything soon. I just need more time. Darnell stood there at the top of the stairs, every instinct screaming at him to force that door open. To see with his own eyes what his wife was hiding, but something held him back. Maybe it was the desperation in Keisha's voice. Maybe it was 10 years of memories telling him this woman had never given him a reason to doubt her. Maybe it was fear of what he might find if he pushed too hard. 3 weeks. Darnell said finally. Not a day more. Thank you. Relief flooded Keisha's voice. Thank you, baby. I love you. I love you too. But as Darnell climbed back up the stairs to their empty bedroom, love felt like a word that had lost its meaning. How did they get here? How did a marriage that seemed so solid develop cracks this deep? Let me take you back 6 weeks. Back to the night everything started to unravel. But before we go any further, I need you to do something for me. If you're new to this channel, take 1 second to hit that subscribe button and tap that notification bell. This story is going to take you on an emotional journey you won't forget, and trust me, you do not want to miss what happens next. Now let's go back to where this all began 6 weeks earlier. Darnell Washington woke up at 3:12 in the morning with a dry throat and an empty space beside him. He reached across the bed automatically, the way he always did. His hand found cold sheets, not cool, cold. Like Keisha hadn't been there for hours, he sat up slowly, blinking in the darkness. The bathroom door was open. No light, no sound of water running. Keisha? No response. Darnell got out of bed, his feet hitting the cool hardwood floor. Their house in Stone Mountain, a suburb of Atlanta, was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that felt wrong at 3 a.m. when your wife should be sleeping beside you. He checked the bathroom first. Empty. Then the guest room. Empty. The spare room they'd talked about turning into a nursery someday. Empty. He was heading down the stairs when he saw it, light, faint but unmistakable, coming from under the basement door. Darnell paused on the stairs, frowning. They rarely used the basement. It was mostly storage, old furniture, Christmas decorations, boxes of things they kept meaning to sort through but never did. Why would Keisha be down there at 3 in the morning? He moved toward the basement door, and that's when he heard it, music, soft, barely audible. And underneath the music, another sound, rhythmic, like something being carved or scraped. Darnell reached for the doorknob. It didn't turn. He tried again. The door was locked. From the inside, that stopped him cold. They didn't lock interior doors. They never had. It was just the two of them in this house. What was there to lock away? Darnell stood there, his hand on the doorknob, his mind racing. He could knock, demand answers, make a scene, but something told him to wait, to watch, to gather more information before making any moves. Quietly, he crept back upstairs and got into bed. He lay there staring at the ceiling, listening for any sound. At exactly 4:47 a.m., he heard the basement door open, heard Keisha's soft footsteps on the stairs, heard her slip into the bathroom, run water briefly, then slide back into bed beside him. She moved carefully, quietly. Like someone practiced at not being caught, Darnell controlled his breathing, kept his eyes closed, pretended to be asleep. Keisha settled against him with a soft sigh. Her hand found his chest, rested there gently. Within minutes, her breathing evened out. But Darnell didn't sleep for the rest of that night. The next morning, Darnell studied his wife across the breakfast table. Keisha looked tired, dark circles under her eyes that her makeup couldn't quite hide, but she also looked different somehow, lighter, almost excited. "Okay?" Darnell asked casually. "You look worn out. Just didn't sleep well." Keisha smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Big presentation at work this week, got a lot on my mind. Anything I can help with?" "No, baby, just work stuff. You know how it is." Darnell nodded slowly. Keisha was an HR manager at one of the largest healthcare companies in Atlanta. Her job was stressful, long hours, difficult conversations. It made sense that she'd have trouble sleeping sometimes, but that didn't explain why she'd been in a locked basement at 3 a.m. "Heading to the site early today," Darnell said, standing. "Got a walkthrough with the inspectors." "'Kay, baby." Keisha kissed his cheek. "Be safe." "Always." He grabbed his hard hat and keys, headed for the door. But before he left, he glanced back at his wife. She was staring at her phone, a small smile playing on her lips, a smile that disappeared the second she noticed him looking. Keisha asked. "Nothing." Darnell forced a smile. "Just thinking how lucky I am." "Sweet talker." Keisha grinned. "Now get to work before you make us both late." Darnell drove to the construction site with a knot in his stomach. Something was going on with his wife. He just didn't know what yet. That night, Darnell set a silent alarm on his phone for 12:30 a.m. When it vibrated under his pillow, he was already awake. Had barely slept at all. Beside him, Keisha's breathing was slow and steady. Too controlled. Like someone pretending to sleep, Darnell lay perfectly still, watching through barely open eyes. At exactly 12:47 a.m., Keisha moved. She slid out of bed slowly, carefully, 1 inch at a time. She paused at the edge of the mattress, looking back at him. Darnell controlled his breathing, kept it slow. Steady after what felt like forever, Keisha stood. She grabbed her robe from the chair by the door, slipped out of the bedroom without making a sound. Darnell counted to 100. Then he followed. He moved down the hallway like a ghost. No lights, no sounds, just careful footsteps on carpet he knew by heart. At the top of the stairs, he paused. The basement door was already closed. Light glowed from the crack at the bottom, and he could hear that sound again, that rhythmic scraping. That soft music. Darnell descended the stairs. Each step felt like a mile. When he reached the basement door, he pressed his ear against it. The sounds were clearer now, definitely scraping, metal on stone, and humming. Keisha was humming along to the music. His hand found the doorknob. He turned it slowly. Locked just like before. Darnell's jaw tightened. His wife had locked him out of part of their own house. What could she possibly be hiding that required this level of secrecy? His mind went to dark places. Was she talking to someone? Meeting someone? There was a small window in the basement. Could someone be coming in through there? Was his wife having an affair in their own basement? The thought made him sick. Made him want to break down this door with his bare hands and confront whatever was on the other side. But he stopped himself. Not yet. Not until he had more information. Darnell went back upstairs. He sat in the living room in the dark, watching the clock. At 3:22 a.m., the basement door opened. Keisha's footsteps moved through the house and up the stairs. Darnell waited 10 minutes. Then he followed. When he entered their bedroom, Keisha was already in bed, facing away from him. Her breathing sounded like sleep, but Darnell knew better now. He climbed into bed without a word. Neither of them spoke, but the silence said everything. The next day at work, Darnell couldn't focus. He stood on the construction site, surrounded by the skeleton of a new apartment building, and all he could think about was his wife's midnight disappearances. "Yo, D, you good?" Anthony Brooks appeared beside him, wiping sweat from his forehead. Aunt had been Darnell's best friend since they were 15 years old, running the streets of Southwest Atlanta together. Now Aunt was a firefighter, one of the best in the city, and the most loyal friend Darnell had ever known. "Fine," Darnell said automatically. "Nah, man, you're not fine. You've been staring at that same beam for 20 minutes. Aunt crossed his arms. "What's going on?" Darnell looked around to make sure no one was listening. The other workers were far enough away, focused on their own tasks. "Something's up with Keisha." Aunt's expression immediately sharpened. "Up how?" "She's been sneaking out of bed every night. Going down to the basement, locking the door, staying down there for hours." "Basement?" Aunt's eyebrows shot up. "What's she doing down there?" "That's the thing, I don't know, she won't tell me, won't let me in." Aunt was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "Dee, I don't want to put ideas in your head, but you know what this sounds like, right? Don't." "Brother, I'm just saying, don't." Darnell's voice was harder now. "Keisha wouldn't do that, I know my wife." "I thought I knew Brianna too." Aunt's face darkened at the mention of his ex-fiancée, the woman who'd left him for his own cousin 3 years ago. "People keep secrets, Dee, even people we think we know better than anyone. This is different." "How is this different? Your wife is sneaking around, locking doors, keeping secrets. What else could it be?" Darnell didn't have an answer. "Look," Aunt said, his voice softening, "I'm not trying to cause problems. I just don't want you to get blindsided like I did. If something's going on, you need to find out sooner rather than later, before it's too late." After Aunt walked away, Darnell stood alone on the construction site, his friend's words echoing in his head. What else could it be? He wished he knew that night. Darnell made a decision. He was going to search for clues. While Keisha was at work the next day, he'd go through the house. Check her phone if he could. Look for anything that might explain what was happening. He felt guilty even thinking about it. 10 years of marriage, and he'd never once violated Keisha's privacy. Never gone through her phone. Never read her emails. Never questioned where she went or who she was with. But that was before the locked doors, before the midnight disappearances, before his wife started keeping secrets that made him feel like a stranger in his own home. The next morning, Darnell pretended to leave for work at his usual time. He drove around the block and parked where he could see their house. At 8:15 a.m., Keisha's car backed out of the driveway. She headed toward downtown Atlanta without looking back. Darnell waited 5 minutes. Then he pulled back into his own driveway and went inside. The house felt different when he knew he wasn't supposed to be there. Quieter, more threatening. He went straight to the basement door, locked. Still locked. Darnell examined the lock. It was new. He could tell by the shine of the metal, the absence of scratches. Keisha had installed this recently. Within the last month or so. He didn't have a key. Hadn't even known this lock existed until a few days ago. He could break through. The door was wood, not steel. A few solid kicks and it would give. But then Keisha would know he'd been down there. Know he'd violated her trust. Know that whatever fragile thing was holding their marriage together had finally snapped. Darnell stepped back from the door. Not yet. Instead, he went to Keisha's home office. The small room off the living room where she sometimes worked on weekends. Her laptop was there, closed on the desk. Password protected, he knew. He didn't even try to open it, but there was a notebook beside the laptop. A regular spiral notebook with a purple cover. Darnell opened it. The pages were filled with Keisha's handwriting, but they weren't notes for work. They were something else entirely, sketches, drawings, rough outlines of shapes he didn't immediately recognize, and notes, fragments of thoughts. Need more clay. The texture isn't right. Arms should be reaching upward. Toward something, toward hope. Forget the details on the hands. Hands tell the whole story. Darnell flipped through page after page. More sketches, more notes. Papa would hate this, would say I'm wasting my time, but Papa's gone now, and I need to do this. For me, for Darnell, for us. Papa, Keisha's father, Raymond Carter, the man who died of a heart attack 4 years ago. Darnell sat down heavily in Keisha's office chair. He remembered the stories Keisha had told him about her father. How strict he'd been. How dismissive of anything he considered impractical. Keisha had wanted to be an artist once. A sculptor. She'd mentioned it early in their relationship, how she'd spent her teenage years working with clay and stone, creating things that made her feel alive. But her father had crushed that dream. Told her art was a waste of time. Told her to get a real degree, a real job, a real life. And Keisha had listened. Buried her artistic soul so deep that Darnell had almost forgotten it existed. Until now, all right, I'm going to pause right here because things are about to get intense. If you're feeling this story, drop a comment telling me what you think Keisha is creating in that basement. The next part of this story is going to blow your mind. Now let's keep going. Darnell put the notebook back exactly where he'd found it. His mind was spinning. Keisha wasn't having an affair. She was creating something. Some kind of sculpture based on the notes. But why the secrecy? Why the locked doors and midnight sessions? Why couldn't she just tell him what she was doing? He thought about calling her, confronting her right there on the phone. But something stopped him. The notes had mentioned him. For Darnell, for us. Whatever Keisha was creating, it was meant for him. A surprise, maybe. Something she wanted to finish before he saw it. Was that worth all this worry? All this suspicion? All these sleepless nights? Darnell left the house and drove to work, his head full of questions that didn't have easy answers that evening. Darnell watched Keisha more carefully. She seemed normal. Happy, even. Chattering about her day at work, asking about his, planning what they'd have for dinner. But underneath the normalcy, Darnell could see tension in her shoulders, nervousness in her eyes, the way she kept glancing toward the basement door like it was calling to her. Okay, he asked during dinner. Fine. Keisha smiled too quickly. Just tired, been having trouble sleeping lately. Maybe you should see a doctor. It's not that serious, just stress. It'll pass. Darnell wanted to push, wanted to say, I know about the basement, I know about the notebook, just tell me what's going on. But he didn't. Part of him wanted to see how this played out. Wanted to see if Keisha would trust him enough to share her secret on her own. And part of him was scared. Scared that if he pushed too hard, something would break. Something that couldn't be fixed the next few weeks followed the same pattern. Every night, Keisha slipped out of bed around midnight. Every night, she locked herself in the basement for hours. Every night, Darnell lay awake, listening to sounds he couldn't identify, imagining things he couldn't see. Told Aunt about what he'd found in the notebook. So she's making art. Aunt sounded skeptical. In the basement, at midnight, for 6 weeks. That's what it looks like. You're just going to wait around until she decides to tell you about it. What else am I supposed to do? Break down the door, force her to explain? Yes, Aunt threw his hands up. That's exactly what you should do. This is your house, your marriage. You have a right to know what's happening under your own roof. It's not that simple. Is that simple? You're just making it complicated because you're scared. Scared of what? Aunt looked at him hard. Scared of finding out the truth. Scared that whatever she's hiding is going to change everything. Darnell didn't respond. Because Aunt was right. He was scared the breaking point came on a Thursday night. Darnell had been lying awake, as usual, when he heard Keisha slip out of bed. Heard her footsteps down the hallway. Heard the basement door open and close. Something snapped inside him. He got out of bed, walked down the stairs, stood in front of the basement door, and he knocked. Keisha. Sounds inside stopped immediately. Her voice was startled, scared. What are you doing up? I'm done waiting. Silence. Keisha, I've been patient. I've given you space. I've tried to trust you even when everything in me was screaming that something was wrong. But I can't do this anymore. 6 weeks of this. 6 weeks of secrets and locked doors and wondering what my own wife is hiding from me. Darnell, please. No, his voice was firm. No more, please. No more, just give me more time. I need to know what's going on. Right now, tonight. He heard Keisha take a shaky breath. Then footsteps approaching the door. Right, she said quietly. You deserve to know. Lock clicked, the door opened, and Keisha stood there in her robe, her hands covered in gray dust, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry for putting you through this. Darnell looked past her into the basement. What he saw made his breath catch. The basement had been transformed. Work lights hung from the ceiling. A heavy-duty table stood in the center, covered with tools he didn't recognize. Clay and stone dust covered every surface. And in the middle of it all stood a sculpture. It was massive, at least 5 feet tall, and it was breathtaking. 2 figures carved from what looked like gray stone embraced in the center of the piece. A man and a woman. Their faces were tilted toward each other. Their hands were intertwined. Their bodies curved together like they'd been carved from the same block, and around them, climbing up from a rough base toward the sky, were smaller figures. Children, 3 of them, reaching upward with tiny hands. What is this? Darnell breathed. It's us, Keisha said softly. It's our family, the family we are, and the family we're going to be. I need to stop here for just 1 second, because what Keisha says next is going to change everything. But before we get to that moment, drop a comment telling me, did you see this coming? What do you think Keisha means by the family we're going to be? All right, let's get back to the story. Darnell walked slowly down the basement stairs, his eyes never leaving the sculpture. Up close, it was even more incredible. The detail was astonishing. He could see individual fingers on the figure's hands. The texture of clothes suggested rather than carved. The expressions on the faces that somehow captured both joy and longing. You made this. His voice was hushed. Reverent. Been working on it for 6 weeks. Keisha wiped tears from her face, leaving gray streaks across her cheeks. Every night after you fell asleep. I'd come down here and work until I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore. But how? When did you learn to do this? I've always known how. Keisha smiled sadly. You forget I was going to be an artist, before my father convinced me it was a waste of time, before I gave it all up for a real career. Darnell remembered. Those early conversations when they were dadding. Keisha talking about her teenage years, her dreams, her disappointments. He'd listened, sympathized, moved on. He hadn't realized how deep those wounds went. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. Why all the secrecy? Keisha was quiet for a moment. I was scared, she finally admitted. Scared that I'd lost whatever talent I used to have. Scared that you'd think I was being foolish, wasting time on a childhood dream instead of focusing on real life. Scared that I'd start this and fail, and then I'd have to admit that my father was right all along. Keisha, I needed to prove to myself that I could still do this. That this part of me wasn't dead, just sleeping. I needed to create something real and beautiful and meaningful before I could share it with anyone, even you. Darnell looked at the sculpture again, at the two figures locked in an eternal embrace, at the children reaching toward the sky. 3, he asked suddenly. What? The children. Why 3 of them? Keisha's expression changed. Something flickered in her eyes, something that looked like fear and hope and excitement all mixed together. Because that's how many we're going to have, she said quietly. Darnell's heart stopped. Keisha, what are you saying? She reached into the pocket of her robe and pulled out a piece of paper. She handed it to him without a word. Darnell unfolded it with shaking hands. It was an ultrasound image, black and white, grainy, and in the center, 3 distinct shapes. I found out 2 weeks ago, Keisha said, her voice trembling. Triplets, we're having triplets, Darnell. Darnell stared at the ultrasound, then at the sculpture, then at his wife. His mind couldn't process what was happening. But we've been trying for years, he said weakly. The doctors said, I know what the doctors said. Tears were flowing freely down Keisha's face now. They said it might never happen. They said we should consider other options, but life had different plans. Darnell looked at the sculpture again, at the 3 small figures reaching toward the sky. You knew, he said slowly. When you carved these children, you already knew. Keisha shook her head. I didn't know, not consciously. I started this sculpture as an anniversary gift, a tribute to our marriage, but somewhere along the way I felt pulled to add the children. I couldn't explain why, I just knew they needed to be there. Then you found out. And then I found out I was pregnant, with 3 bobbies. Keisha laughed through her tears. It's like I knew without knowing, like my hands understood something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. Darnell pulled his wife into his arms and held her tight. He could feel her shaking, could feel his own tears starting to fall. We're going to be parents, he whispered. After all these years of trying, of hopping, of praying, we're going to have a family. 3 bobbies at once, Keisha said into his chest. Are you ready for that? Darnell laughed, a real laugh. The first genuine laugh he'd felt in weeks. Baby, after 6 weeks of thinking you were having an affair or planning to leave me or God knows what else, triplets sound like a vacation. Keisha pulled back and stared at him. You thought I was having an affair. What else was I supposed to think? You were sneaking out every night, locking doors, keeping secrets. My boy aunt was convinced you had someone else down here. Keisha's expression shifted from shock to hurt to something that looked almost like guilt. Oh, Darnell, I'm so sorry. I never meant to make you doubt me. I was so focused on finishing this sculpture, on keeping it a surprise, that I didn't think about how it looked from your side. Looked bad, Darnell admitted. Real bad. I know, and I hate that I put you through that. She took his face in her hands, leaving gray dust on his cheeks. But I promise you there has never been anyone else. There will never be anyone else. You are my heart, Darnell Washington. You and these 3 bobbies we somehow made together. Darnell kissed her then, deep and long and full of all the emotions he'd been holding back for weeks. Relief, joy, love, fear, excitement. When they finally broke apart, both of them were crying. So, Darnell said, wiping his eyes. What do we do now? Keisha smiled up at him. Now we go back upstairs. We get some sleep. And tomorrow we start planning for the 3 little people who are going to turn our lives completely upside down. What about the sculpture? Keisha looked at her creation, the hours of work, the nights of sacrifice, the physical representation of everything she'd been feeling for the past 6 weeks. It's almost finished, she said. A few more touches, then it goes in our living room where we can see it every day, where our children can see it when they're old enough to understand. Understand what? Keisha took his hand. Understand that their mother loved them before she even knew they existed. That their father trusted her even when he had every reason to doubt. That our family was written in stone before it was written in blood. Darnell squeezed her hand. That's beautiful. I'm an artist. Keisha grinned through her tears. Beautiful is what I do. They walked up the basement stairs together, hand in hand. Behind them, the sculpture stood silent in the work lights. 2 figures embracing. 3 children reaching for the sky, a prophecy in stone, a promise kept, a family about to begin. Now listen, I know you want to find out what happens next. Do the triplets arrive safely? What does Darnell's reaction look like when he holds his bobbies for the first time? And what about that sculpture? Does Keisha keep making art? Let's continue. The morning after Darnell saw the sculpture changed everything. He woke up at 7:15 a.m. to sunlight cutting through the bedroom curtains and the smell of something sweet drifting up from the kitchen. Cinnamon, butter, brown sugar. Keisha was making her grandmother's famous cinnamon French toast. The kind she only made on special occasions. Birthdays, Christmas morning. The day Darnell proposed. He lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, replaying last night in his head, the locked door finally opening. The sculpture standing tall under work lights. 2 figures embracing. 3 children reaching upward. And the ultrasound. That grainy black and white image with 3 tiny shapes that were going to become human beings. His human beings, triplets, after 4 years of trying. 4 years of negative pregnancy tests. 4 years of doctor appointments that ended with phrases like unexplained infertility and you might want to consider alternative options. 4 years of watching Keisha cry in the bathroom when she thought he couldn't hear. Now this. 3 bobbies all at once. Like the universe had been saving up and decided to deliver everything at the same time. Darnell got out of bed and headed downstairs. Keisha was at the stove, humming softly. She was wearing his old Morehouse College t-shirt, the one that hung past her knees. Her hair was wrapped in a silk bonnet. She had flour on her cheek. She was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Morning, baby. Keisha smiled when she saw him, a real smile, the kind he hadn't seen in weeks. Hungry, starving. Darnell wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. How are you feeling? Good, a little nauseous, but the ginger tea helps. She flipped a piece of French toast expertly. The doctor said morning sickness might be worse with multiples. Might be. Will definitely be. She was being polite. Darnell laughed and kissed her neck. We need to talk about some things. I know, a lot of things. I know that too. Keisha turned off the stove and faced him. But first, let's eat. I can't have serious conversations on an empty stomach. Your children demand cinnamon French toast. My children, Darnell grinned. They're mine now. They're yours when they're demanding food at 7 a.m. They're mine when they're being adorable. That doesn't seem fair. Welcome to parenthood. Keisha handed him a plate stacked high with golden French toast. It's never fair. They sat at the kitchen table together. Sunlight poured through the windows. The food was perfect. For the first time in 6 weeks, the silence between them felt comfortable instead of suspicious. But Darnell knew they couldn't avoid the conversation forever. Far along are you? He asked between bites. 11 weeks. 11 weeks. Darnell set his fork down. You've known for 2 weeks and you've been pregnant for 11. I didn't know for the first 9 weeks. I thought I was just exhausted from the late nights working on the sculpture. I was tired all the time, nauseous in the mornings, emotional about everything. I figured it was stress. What made you finally take a test? Keisha paused, chewing slowly. Your mother. My mother. She called me last week. Said I looked different the last time she saw us. Said I had that glow. Keisha rolled her eyes affectionately. You know how Miss Lorraine is. She's been praying for grandbabies since the day we got married. So Mama told you to take a test? She strongly suggested it. I told her she was being ridiculous. Then I bought 3 tests on the way home from work just to prove her wrong. Keisha's voice got quiet. All 3 came back positive. Darnell reached across the table and took her hand. Why didn't you tell me right then? Keisha looked down at their intertwined fingers. Because I was scared, Darnell. We've been through this before. Remember 2 years ago, when I was late and we got so excited and then it turned out to be nothing? Darnell remembered. He remembered Keisha's face when the doctor confirmed it was a false positive. The way the light went out of her eyes. The week she spent barely talking, barely eating, barely existing. I couldn't go through that again, Keisha continued. I couldn't get your hopes up and then watch them crash, so I went to the doctor by myself, got the blood work done, got the ultrasound, made sure it was real before I said anything. The ultrasound showed 3. Keisha nodded. The doctor's face was priceless. She kept counting and recounting. Then she turned the screen toward me and said, Mrs. Washington, I hope you have a lot of space in your house because you're going to need it. Darnell laughed, then stopped. Wait, is this why you added the 3 children to the sculpture? Because you already knew? No, Keisha shook her head firmly. I added the children weeks before I found out I was pregnant. That's what makes this so strange, Darnell. I carved those 3 little figures without understanding why. I just felt like they needed to be there, like the sculpture wasn't complete without them. Then you found out you were actually carrying 3 bobbies. Then I found out I was actually carrying 3 bobbies. They sat in silence, both of them processing the weight of that coincidence. If it even was a coincidence. Some things can't be explained, Keisha said softly. Some things just are. Darnell squeezed her hand. Whatever it is, explained or not, I'm grateful. Me too, baby. Me too. The first person Darnell told was his mother. Lorraine Washington was a 63-year-old retired postal worker who had raised Darnell and his 2 sisters on her own after their father walked out. She was tough as nails, sharp as a razor, and had been asking about grandchildren since Darnell's wedding reception. Mama, I need to tell you something. You finally got my baby pregnant, Lorraine shouted before Darnell could finish his sentence. How did you? I told Keisha she had that glow. I know that glow. I had that glow 3 times myself. When are you due? Is it a boy or a girl? Have you started picking names? Mama, slow down. It's actually a little more complicated than that. Complicated how? Is the baby okay? Is Keisha okay? Lord Jesus, don't tell me something's wrong. Nothing's wrong. Everything's perfect. It's just... Darnell took a breath. It's not 1 baby, Mama. It's 3. Silence on the other end of the phone lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then Lorraine Washington screamed so loud Darnell had to hold the phone away from his ear. 3 babis. Lord have mercy. 3 grandbabs at once. Mama, please don't. Praise Jesus. I've been praying for this. I told God, I said, Lord, I just want some grandbabis before I leave this earth, and he gave me 3. Darnell could hear his mother crying and laughing at the same time. Despite everything, he found himself smiling. Triplets, Mama, 2 girls and a boy. This detail was new to Darnell, too. Keisha had shown him the full ultrasound report that morning. 2 girls, 1 boy, all healthy, all strong heartbeats. Girls and a boy, Lorraine repeated reverently. Oh, Darnell. Your father would have loved this. Darnell's smile faded slightly at the mention of his father. Marcus Washington SR had left when Darnell was 7, just packed a bag one morning and never came back. No explanation, no goodbye, no forwarding address. 30 years later, Darnell still carried that wound. Not going to be like him, Mama, Darnell said quietly. No, you're not, baby. Lorraine's voice softened. You're going to be the father he never was. Those children are going to know what it feels like to be loved by a man who stays. Darnell wiped his eyes roughly. Yeah, they will. Now put Keisha on the phone. I need to talk to my daughter-in-law about prenatal vitamins and proper nutrition. Is she eating enough? She needs to be eating for 4 now. Mama, put her on the phone, Darnell. All right, I need to pause here for just 1 moment. If you've been riding with Darnell and Keisha from the beginning, you already know this story has some incredible twists. But trust me when I tell you, what happens next is going to hit different. You do not want to miss what's coming. The next person Darnell told was Anthony. They met at their usual spot, Ray's Barbershop on Cascade Road. Every other Saturday, rain or shine, they got their cuts together, had been doing it since they were teenagers. So let me get this straight. Ant sat in the barber's chair, his face twisted in disbelief. She was making a sculpture. A sculpture. In the basement. In the basement. Every night for 6 weeks. Every night for 6 weeks. Ant stared at him for a long moment, then he burst out laughing. Bro, I had you convinced she was cheating. I had whole theories. I was about to suggest you hire a private investigator. I know. Darnell couldn't help but laugh too. You had me going crazy, man. A sculpture. That's what had you losing sleep. Your wife was downstairs being Michelangelo while you were upstairs thinking she was being unfaithful. It's not funny. It's hilarious. Ant wiped tears from his eyes. Wait until I tell the guys at the station. They're going to roast you for a month. Don't you dare. Oh, I'm definitely telling them. This is too good. Barber, an older man named Ray who'd been cutting hair in this shop for 30 years, chimed in without looking up from his work. Sounds to me like your wife is a good woman, young man. Not many wives would spend 6 weeks making something with their own hands as a gift for their husband. Most women just go to the mall. Thank you, Ray. Darnell shot Ant a look. I'm just saying. Ant held up his hands. If Brianna had been sneaking around every night for 6 weeks, it definitely wouldn't have been because she was making art. It would have been because she was. We know what Brianna was doing, Darnell interrupted. That's why she's your ex. Aunt's smile faded. Fair point. They were quiet for a minute. The buzz of clippers filled the silence. There's more, Darnell said finally. More than the sculpture. Keisha's pregnant. Aunt sat straight up in his chair, nearly causing the barber to nick his ear. Hold on, what? We're having bobbies. Babies, plural. Triplets, 2 girls and a boy. The barber shop went completely silent. Every barber, every customer, every person waiting in the plastic chairs by the door, everyone turned to stare at Darnell. Triplets, Aunt shouted. After all those years of trying. After all those years of trying. Aunt jumped out of his chair with shaving cream still on his neck and grabbed Darnell in a bear hug so tight it lifted him off the ground. Boy is going to be a daddy, 3 times over. The whole barber shop erupted. Men were clapping, shouting congratulations. Ray the barber was shaking his head and smiling, saying something about God's timing being perfect. Darnell stood in the middle of it all, overwhelmed, happy, terrified. Going to be a great father, Aunt said, his voice suddenly serious. You know that, right? I hope so. I know so. Aunt put his hands on Darnell's shoulders and looked him dead in the eye. You're not your old man, you never were. Those bobbies are going to have the kind of father most kids only dream about. Darnell swallowed hard. Thanks, brother. Now, Aunt grinned. Let's talk about the real question. You're going to need a bigger car. The days after the big reveal moved fast. Darnell threw himself into preparation mode. He was a project manager by trade. Planning was what he did best. And this was the biggest project of his life, first item on the list. The nursery. Their house in Stone Mountain had 3 bedrooms, the master, a guest room, and a small office that Keisha used for work. 3 bobbies meant they needed more space. We could convert the guest room and the office, Darnell said one evening, standing in the hallway between the 2 rooms. Knock out this wall between them, make one big nursery. That's a lot of construction work, Keisha said, leaning against the doorframe. Darnell looked at her. Baby, I literally build things for a living. Point. While I'm at it, I want to finish out the basement properly. Put in good lighting, ventilation, a real workstation for you, Keisha blinked. For me, for your art. Darnell turned to face her fully. You're not giving this up, Keisha. Not again. You spent 6 weeks creating something incredible down there, and you're not going to stop just because life is about to get busy. Darnell, we're having 3 bobbies. I don't think I'll have time to. We'll make time. I'll help. Mama already volunteered to come over whenever you need her. Aunt's sister offered too. You're going to have your art studio in the basement, and you're going to use it. Keisha's eyes filled with tears. You really want me to keep creating? I want you to be the person you were always meant to be. Before your father talked you out of it, before you decided your dreams weren't practical enough, before you buried this part of yourself. Darnell pulled her close. You're an artist, Keisha Washington. That sculpture downstairs proves it, and our children are going to grow up watching their mother create beauty with her own hands. Keisha pressed her face into his chest. My father would have hated this. Would have said I was being irresponsible. Your father was wrong. Darnell's voice was gentle but firm. He loved you, and I understand why he pushed you towards stability. He came from a hard place, but being practical and being creative aren't opposites. You can be both. You are both. Keisha looked up at him. When did you become so wise? About 6 weeks ago, when my wife started disappearing every midnight, and I had to figure out how to hold it together without losing my mind. They both laughed. And in that laughter, something healed. Something that had been broken for a long time. Keisha's mother, Dorothy, drove down from Macon the following weekend. Dorothy Carter was a small woman with big energy. She'd been a nurse for 35 years before retiring, and she approached everything with the calm efficiency of someone used to managing chaos. But when she saw the sculpture in the basement, she broke down completely. Oh, baby. Dorothy pressed her hands to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. You did this? I did this, Mama. Dorothy walked slowly around the sculpture, touching it gently. The 2 figures embracing, the 3 children reaching upward, the details in the hands, the faces, the way the stone seemed almost alive. This is extraordinary, Dorothy whispered. Keisha, this is professional quality work. This belongs in a gallery. Mama, come on. I'm serious. Dorothy turned to face her daughter. When you were a teenager, working with clay in the backyard, I knew you had talent. I could see it. Everyone could see it, but your father. She trailed off, her expression pained. Daddy thought it was a waste of time. Your father thought a lot of things were a waste of time. Dorothy sat down on the basement stairs heavily. He was a good man in many ways. He worked hard. He provided for this family. But he was scared, Keisha, scared of poverty, scared of struggle. He watched his own mother try to make it as a musician and nearly starve. He swore his children would never go through that. So he killed my dream. Tried to redirect it. There's a difference. Dorothy paused. Though I suppose the result was the same. Didn't you stop him? Why didn't you stand up for me? The question hung in the air between them, heavy, raw. Dorothy was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because I was scared too, not of poverty. I was scared of losing your father, of contradicting him, of being the kind of wife who went against her husband. She wiped her eyes. I should have fought for you, Keisha. I should have told Raymond that your talent was a gift, not a liability. I should have protected your dream even if it meant fighting with the man I loved. Mama, let me finish. Dorothy stood and walked to her daughter. She took Keisha's face in her hands. I failed you, and I have lived with that failure every single day since you put down that clay and picked up a business textbook. But I am telling you now, right here in this basement with this magnificent sculpture as my witness. Don't you dare give this up again. Don't you dare let anyone, including yourself, tell you that this gift is not worth pursuing. Keisha crumbled. She fell into her mother's arms and cried, deep, shaking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere far below the surface. Tears she'd been holding for almost 20 years. Darnell stood at the top of the basement stairs, watching. His own eyes were wet. He'd known Keisha carried pain about her father, about giving up her art, about the life she might have lived. But until this moment, he hadn't understood how deep those wounds went. He walked down the stairs and wrapped his arms around both women. They stood there, the three of them, holding each other in the glow of the work lights while the sculpture watched silently. After a while, Dorothy pulled back and dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Now, she said briskly, her nurse voice clicking back into place. Enough crying. We have 3 grandbabies to prepare for. Keisha, are you taking your prenatal vitamins? How's your iron? Are you eating enough protein? Mama, I literally just told you about the sculpture and we had a whole emotional breakthrough and now you're asking about vitamins. Emotional breakthroughs don't build strong bones. Dorothy marched up the stairs. I'm making dinner, real dinner, with vegetables. You look too thin for a woman carrying 3 children. Keisha looked at Darnell. Your mother and my mother are going to either save us or drive us crazy. Probably both, Darnell agreed. Listen, we're about to get to a part of this story that really tested Darnell and Keisha's strength. So before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, take a second to like this video. It helps more people discover this channel and hear stories like this one. Let's keep going. The weeks that followed brought a new rhythm to the Washington household. Keisha was still working at her HR job, but her energy was fading fast. The pregnancy was demanding. Triple the hormones. Triple the morning sickness. Triple the exhaustion. By week 16, she was showing significantly. Her doctor, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Acaffer, monitored her closely. Triplet pregnancies are high risk by definition, Dr. Acaffer explained during one of their many appointments. We need to watch for preeclampsia, gestational diabetes, and premature labor. Keisha, you're going to need to reduce your stress levels. That means cutting back at work sooner rather than later. How soon? Keisha asked. I'd recommend stopping work by week 24 at the latest. Ideally sooner. Keisha's face fell. That's only 2 months away. Your body is doing the work of 3 pregnancies simultaneously. It needs rest. On the drive home, Keisha was quiet. Darnell could feel her anxiety radiating from the passenger seat. We'll be fine, he said, reading her mind. I've been putting money aside. Between my salary and our savings, we can handle a few months without your income. It's not just the money. Keisha stared out the window. My job is part of who I am, Darnell. If I'm not working and I'm too tired to make art, then who am I? Just a pregnant woman lying on a couch. You're a mother growing 3 whole human beings inside your body. That's not nothing, Keisha. That's extraordinary. Doesn't feel extraordinary. It feels exhausting. Darnell reached over and took her hand. Then let it be exhausting. Let me carry some of the weight for a while. That's what I'm here for. Keisha squeezed his hand but didn't respond. Week 20 brought complications. Keisha woke up one morning with a headache that wouldn't quit. Her ankles were swollen. Her blood pressure, when Darnell checked it with the home monitor Dr. Acaffer had recommended, was higher than normal. Going to the hospital, Darnell said firmly. It's probably nothing, just the bobbies pressing on everything. Keisha, we're going, now. She must have heard something in his voice because she didn't argue. At the hospital, Dr. Acaffer ran tests, blood work, urine analysis, blood pressure checks every 15 minutes. 2 hours later, she returned with a serious expression. Showing early signs of preeclampsia, Dr. Acaffer said. Your blood pressure is elevated and there's protein in your urine. Keisha gripped Darnell's hand tight enough to hurt. What does that mean for the bobbies? She asked, her voice steady even though her eyes were terrified. Right now, the bobbies are fine. Strong heartbeats on all three, good growth measurements, but preeclampsia can progress quickly, especially with multiples. I'm putting you on bed rest effective immediately. Rest? Keisha looked like she'd been slapped. For how long? For the duration of the pregnancy. Until we deliver, which given the circumstances, I'd like to schedule for around week 32 or 33. That's almost 3 months from now. I know it's not what you wanted to hear. Dr. Akaffer's voice was compassionate but unyielding. But your health and the health of these bobbies depend on you resting. No work, no stress, limited physical activity. Keisha was quiet for the entire drive home. When they pulled into the driveway, she finally spoke. I can't even go to the basement. I can't even work on the sculpture. The sculpture is almost finished. There are details left, small things, the children's faces. Her voice cracked. I wanted their faces to be perfect. Darnell turned off the engine and faced his wife. The faces can wait. Our bobbies can't. Keisha nodded slowly. A single tear rolled down her cheek. I just found my art again, Darnell. After all these years, I just got it back, and now I have to stop. You're not stopping. You're pausing. There's a difference. There. Yes. Darnell took both her hands. Listen to me. You are going to get through this pregnancy. You are going to deliver 3 healthy bobbies. And then when you're ready, you're going to go back down to that basement and finish those faces. And they're going to be perfect, because you're going to be looking at the real faces of our children for inspiration. Keisha stared at him. Then she smiled. A small, fragile smile, but a real one. When did you get so good at speeches? Been practicing in the shower. She laughed. Actually laughed. And the sound of it made Darnell's chest ache with love bed rest was brutal. Keisha was not built for stillness. She was a doer, a mover, a woman who had never met a problem she couldn't solve through action and determination. Lying on the couch for weeks on end nearly drove her out of her mind. Darnell did everything he could to keep her comfortable. He rearranged the living room so the couch faced the window with the best view of their backyard garden. He brought her sketch pads and pencils so she could draw even if she couldn't sculpt. He made sure she always had her favorite snacks within reach, pickles and peanut butter, a combination that made him gag but that Keisha insisted was genius. It's the bobbies, she told him when he made a face. They have sophisticated taste. They have weird taste. They get that from you. Excuse me, your mother puts hot sauce on ice cream. That's different. That's cultural. That's insanity. Banter kept things light. But underneath the jokes, both of them were scared. Every doctor's appointment brought new anxiety. Every blood pressure reading was a potential crisis. Every strange pain or unusual symptom sent Darnell into quiet panic. He didn't let Keisha see his fear. At night, after she fell asleep, he'd sit in the living room scrolling through medical articles on his phone, reading everything he could about preeclampsia and premature births and triplet deliveries. The statistics weren't always reassuring. Aunt noticed the toll it was taking. You look like you haven't slept in a month, Aunt said one afternoon when he stopped by to drop off food his mother had made. I sleep fine. When's the last time you slept more than 4 hours? Darnell didn't answer, which was answer enough. D, you can't take care of Keisha and 3 bobbies if you run yourself into the ground. You need help. Got help. Mama comes by every other day. Keisha's mother is here on weekends. What about you? Who's taking care of you? Darnell looked at his friend. Nobody takes care of the man, Aunt. That's not how this works. That's exactly how men end up in the hospital from stress, or worse. Aunt sat down across from him. Look, I know you think you have to do everything yourself. I know your father leaving messed you up and you've spent your whole life proving you're not him. But carrying the entire weight of this family on your shoulders alone isn't strength. It's stubbornness. There's a difference. Not in your case. Aunt leaned forward. Let people in, D, let your boy help. That's what I'm here for. Darnell was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. Okay. What? Okay, I need help. I need someone to talk to. Someone who isn't my pregnant wife or my worried mother. Aunt smiled. That's what I'm here for, brother, always. That point on, Aunt came by twice a week. Sometimes they talked about the pregnancy, sometimes about work, sometimes about absolutely nothing important at all. They watched basketball, argued about barbecue. Debated whether Tupac or Biggie was the better lyricist. A conversation they'd been having for 20 years without resolution. It helped. More than Darnell expected, week 28 brought a scare. Keisha woke up in the middle of the night with sharp pains in her abdomen. She grabbed Darnell's arm in the darkness, her grip desperate. Something's wrong. Those 2 words sent ice through Darnell's veins. He called Dr. Akaffer immediately. She told them to come straight to the hospital. The drive took 17 minutes. Darnell made it in 11. At At the hospital, they rushed Keisha into triage. Monitors were attached. IV lines started. Nurses moved with practiced urgency that somehow made everything feel more terrifying. Dr. Akaffer arrived within 20 minutes, her expression calm but focused. "Having contractions," she said after examining Keisha. "Your body is trying to go into early labor. It's too soon." Keisha's voice was shaking. "They're not ready. They're only 28 weeks. "I know. We're going to give you medication to stop the contractions and steroids to help develop the baby's lungs in case we can't stop them." Dr. Akaffer looked at both of them with steady eyes. "I won't lie to you. This is serious. But babies born at 28 weeks have excellent survival rates with proper care. We're going to do everything we can to keep them inside as long as possible." Darnell held Keisha's hand while the medication dripped through her IV. He watched the fetal monitors, 3 separate lines tracking 3 separate heartbeats. All 3 were strong, all 3 were steady. "Fighters," he whispered to Keisha. "Just like their mama. Just like their daddy," Keisha whispered back. The medication worked. The contractions slowed, then stopped. But Dr. Akaffer kept Keisha in the hospital for 3 days, monitoring everything. "We bought time," she said when she finally discharged them. "But we may not get much more. I want you prepared for the possibility that these babies could come early, very early." On the drive home, Keisha was silent. When they pulled into the driveway, she turned to Darnell. "Need you to do something for me? Anything. Down to the basement. Look at the sculpture." "Keisha, please, just go look at it. Look at the children's faces." Darnell was confused, but he went. He descended the basement stairs and turned on the work lights. The sculpture stood where it always stood, 2 figures embracing, 3 children reaching upward. He looked at the children's faces. They were unfinished, just rough shapes where features should be. Smooth stone waiting for eyes, noses, mouths, waiting for identity. Darnell understood. He pulled out his phone and called Keisha upstairs. "See them. I need to finish their faces, Darnell." Keisha's voice was firm despite her exhaustion. "Before they arrive, I need to finish the sculpture. I need to complete what I started." The doctor said bed rest, no physical activity. "I know what the doctor said, but this is important. This sculpture is my promise to our children, my way of telling them they were wanted, dreamed about, loved before they even existed. Keisha, bring me the clay, the small tools. I can work sitting down, small movements, nothing strenuous. I just need to finish their faces." Darnell hesitated. Every practical bone in his body screamed that this was a bad idea. That Keisha should be resting, not working. But he also understood something about his wife that he hadn't fully grasped before. Art wasn't just a hobby for Keisha. It wasn't a pastime or a distraction. It was part of her soul. Taking it away from her, even for medical reasons, was like asking her to stop breathing. "Bring everything upstairs," he said finally. "You can work on the couch, small movements only, and if your blood pressure goes up even a single point, we stop. Deal. And I'm sitting right next to you the entire time. I wouldn't have it any other way." For the next 3 weeks, Keisha worked on the children's faces. She sat propped up on the couch with pillows surrounding her enormous belly, a tray of small sculpting tools beside her, working on 3 small clay models that she would later transfer to the main sculpture. Darnell watched her work, watched her hands, swollen from pregnancy, move with precision and tenderness over the soft clay. She shaped foreheads and chins, carved tiny eyes that somehow looked hopeful even in clay, created mouths that seemed to be smiling even before they had lips. "Do you know what they look like?" Darnell asked one evening. "I don't." Keisha's hands moved steadily, shaping a tiny nose. "I'm sculpting who they feel like." "What do they feel like?" Keisha was quiet for a moment, concentrating. "This one," she said, holding up the first clay face, "feels curious, like she's going to come into this world asking questions about everything." "That's our first girl. That's our first girl." Keisha set the face down gently and picked up the second. "This one feels gentle, peaceful, like she's going to be the calm in every storm." "The boy," Keisha held up the third face. "He feels brave, like he's going to run toward everything that scares him." Darnell looked at the 3 small clay faces, 3 personalities already emerging from stone, 3 children already becoming real. "Perfect," he said. "They will be." Keisha smiled. "When they're ready, they'll be perfect. Now before I tell you what happens next, I need you to do something. If this story has touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Send it to a friend, a family member, someone who's going through a hard time. Stories like this remind us that even in the darkest moments, beautiful things are being shaped in places we can't see. And stay right here because the final chapter of Darnell and Keisha's story is coming, I promise you. The ending is going to take your breath away. Week 31, a Tuesday morning. 6:42 am. Darnell was in the shower when he heard Keisha scream. He'd never moved so fast in his life. Didn't even turn off the water, just grabbed a towel and ran. Keisha was sitting on the edge of the bed, her face twisted in pain, her hands gripping the sheets. "Coming," she gasped. "Darnell, they're coming now." No time for panic, no time for fear. Darnell's construction brain kicked in, the brain that handled emergencies on work sites, the brain that made decisions when everything was falling apart. He called 911 first, then Dr. Acaffer, then his mother. "Ambulance is on the way," he told Keisha, helping her lie back down. "Just breathe, baby, just breathe. It's too early." Tears streamed down her face. 31 weeks, it's too early. Acaffer said Bobbies born after 30 weeks do well. Strong survival rates. Good outcomes. Our Bobbies are going to be fine. "Promise me." Darnell looked into his wife's eyes, saw fear, saw love, saw a mother already fighting for her children. "I promise," he said, even though he knew it was a promise he couldn't guarantee. But in that moment, Keisha needed certainty more than honesty. The ambulance arrived in 8 minutes. The ride to the hospital was a blur. Sirens, speed bumps that made Keisha cry out. Paramedics monitoring vital signs and speaking in codes Darnell didn't understand. At the hospital, everything moved fast. Dr. Acaffer was already there, scrubbed and ready. She took one look at Keisha's stats and made the call. "We're doing a C-section. Now, these Bobbies are ready whether we are or not." They wheeled Keisha into the operating room. Darnell walked beside her, holding her hand, wearing the blue scrubs a nurse had shoved at him. "I'm scared," Keisha whispered as they positioned her on the table. "Me too." Darnell squeezed her hand. "But we're scared together, and together we can handle anything." Keisha managed a small smile. "That sounds like something from a greeting card." "I told you I practice my speeches in the shower." She laughed, then winced, then squeezed his hand so hard he thought his bones would break. "Here we go," Dr. Acaffer said from behind the surgical drape. "Dad, you ready?" Darnell wasn't ready, not even close, but he nodded anyway. "Let's meet your Bobbies." The first cry came at 7:34 am, high-pitched. "Angry, alive. Baby girl number 1, Dr. Acaffer announced. "She's small, but she's loud. Good sign." Darnell saw a flash of tiny brown skin and dark hair before the NICU team whisked the baby away to a warming station. 45 seconds later, the second cry. "Baby girl number 2. She's quieter than her sister, but breathing well." And then 1 minute and 12 seconds after that, the third. "And here's your boy. Congratulations, Mom and Dad. 3 healthy Bobbies." Darnell was crying before he realized it. Standing in a hospital operating room in oversized scrubs, tears pouring down his face, watching 3 impossibly small humans being checked and measured and wrapped in blankets. His children, his family, his miracle. "Are they okay?" Keisha asked from the table, her voice drugged and dreamy. "Are they all okay?" "They're perfect," Darnell managed through his tears. "Keisha, they're absolutely perfect." "You see their faces?" Darnell looked at his 3 newborns, at their tiny scrunched-up faces, at their little fists clenched against the brightness of the world, and he thought about the sculpture in their basement. The 3 clay faces Keisha had carved on the couch, the curious one, the gentle one, the brave one. "Yeah," he said softly. "I saw their faces." "You got them exactly right." Story doesn't end here, not even close. Darnell and Keisha bring their Bobbies home, but the challenges are just beginning. 3 premature infants. A marriage tested by sleepless nights, a mother torn between her children and her art, and a discovery about the sculpture that will change the way you see this entire story. And tell me in the comments, what do you think Darnell and Keisha named their 3 babies? Let's continue. 3 Bobbies came home on a rainy Wednesday afternoon in November. 17 days they had spent in the NICU. 17 days of plastic incubators and heart monitors and feeding tubes, so small they looked like thread. 17 days of Darnell and Keisha driving to the hospital every morning and leaving every night with empty arms and heavy hearts. But today was different. Today, Darnell pulled their brand new SUV, purchased 2 weeks ago because Aunt was right. They needed a bigger car, up to the hospital entrance. Today, Keisha sat in the back seat between 2 car seats while Darnell loaded the third beside her. Today, 3 tiny humans wrapped in soft blankets were finally coming home. Baby girl number 1. 4 pounds, 11 ounces. Born screaming and hadn't stopped since. The nurses called her the boss because she demanded attention every single second. When she was hungry, the entire NICU knew about it. When she was uncomfortable, she made sure everyone shared her displeasure. She came into this world with opinions, and she was not shy about expressing them. Darnell and Keisha named her Zora. After Zora, Neil Hurston, because any child born that loud and that fearless deserved a name that matched. Baby girl number 2, 4 pounds, 3 ounces, the quiet one. She rarely cried. She watched everything with wide, dark eyes that seemed to take in the whole world without judgment. The nurses called her Old Soul because she had the calm, knowing expression of someone who had been here before. They named her Simone, after Nina Simone, because there was something musical about the way she moved, even at barely a month old. Something graceful and deliberate and deeply peaceful. Baby boy, 4 pounds, 7 ounces. The middle child in birth order, the wild card in personality. He squirmed constantly, kicked his blankets off every chance he got, and grabbed at anything within reach. One nurse swore he tried to pull out his own IV at 3 days old. The staff called him Houdini because keeping him contained was a full-time job. They named him Elijah because Keisha said the name meant strength from God, and any child who tried to escape a hospital incubator at 3 days old clearly had strength to spare. Zora, Simone, Elijah, 3 names, 3 lives, 3 reasons to wake up every morning and keep going no matter how hard things got. And things were about to get very, very hard. The first week at home almost broke them. Nobody tells you what it's really like having triplets. The books don't prepare you. The parenting blogs don't prepare you. The well-meaning advice from family and friends who raised one baby at a time definitely does not prepare you. 3 bobbies don't take turns. They don't coordinate their needs. They don't care that you just fed one and changed another and rocked the third to sleep. They want what they want when they want it, and they want it all at the same time. Zora's screaming woke Simone. Simone's fussing startled Elijah. Elijah's kicking knocked his bottle over, which made him scream, which woke Zora, which started the whole cycle again. Darnell and Keisha worked in shifts. 2 hours on, 2 hours off, around the clock. No breaks, no pauses, no mercy. By day 3, Keisha was running on fumes. Her C-section incision ached. Her body was still recovering from the trauma of a high-risk pregnancy. She hadn't showered in 2 days. Hadn't eaten a full meal in longer than that. She was sitting on the nursery floor at 4 a.m., feeding Simone with one hand and rocking Elijah's bassinet with her foot while Zora screamed from her crib when the tears came. Not gentle tears. Not quiet tears. Full-body, chest-shaking sobs that she couldn't control and couldn't stop. Darnell found her like that. He'd been sleeping in the guest room during his off shift, but something woke him. Maybe it was Zora's screaming. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the sound of his wife's heart breaking through the walls. He stood in the nursery doorway, still half asleep, and took in the scene. Keisha on the floor, Bobby's crying, his wife falling apart in the middle of the night surrounded by the children she'd prayed for. He didn't say a word. He walked in, picked up Zora and held her against his chest. She quieted almost immediately. Something about Darnell's deep voice and broad shoulders seemed to calm her in ways nothing else could. Then he sat down beside Keisha on the floor. They sat there together, 2 exhausted parents, 3 tiny humans, the soft hum of the white noise machine, the glow of the nightlight casting shadows on the walls. "I can't do this," Keisha whispered. Her voice was raw, broken. "I thought I could, but I can't. There's 3 of them and 2 of us, and the math doesn't work, Darnell. The math doesn't work. The math doesn't have to work tonight." Darnell's voice was calm despite the exhaustion pulling at every muscle in his body. "Tonight, we just survive, that's all. We just make it to sunrise. Then what? Tomorrow's going to be exactly the same, and the day after that, and the day after that. Maybe, but we'll figure it out. We always do. What if we don't? What if I'm not cut out for this? What if I'm a terrible mother?" "Keisha." Darnell shifted Zora to one arm and put the other around his wife. "Look at what you're doing right now. You're feeding one baby, rocking another, and worrying about the third. At 4 in the morning, after major surgery, on no sleep. A terrible mother doesn't do that. A terrible mother doesn't care enough to cry about it." Keisha leaned into him. Simone finished her bottle and let out a tiny burp. Elijah finally stopped kicking and fell asleep. Zora was already snoring softly against Darnell's chest. "We need help," Keisha admitted. "Real help, not just Mama coming by for a few hours. We need someone here every day." "I know, I've been thinking the same thing." "We afford it? We'll figure it out. That's what I do, remember? I figure things out." Keisha looked up at him. Even in the dim light, even with tears drying on her cheeks and baby spit up on her shirt, she was beautiful. "Thank you," she whispered. "For being here, for staying, for not running." "Running?" Darnell frowned. "Why would I run? Because this is hard. Because it would be easier to leave than to stay. Because your father, my father, was a coward. Darnell's voice was quiet but fierce. He ran because he was weak, because he couldn't handle the weight. But I'm not him, Keisha. I will never be him. These bobbies have my name. This family has my heart. And I'm not going anywhere. Not tonight. Not ever. Keisha pressed her face into his shoulder. I love you, Darnell Washington. I love you too, Keisha Washington. Now let's put these bobbies down and get some sleep before they wake up in 45 minutes and start the whole show over again. Despite everything, Keisha laughed. A tired, broken, beautiful laugh. They were going to survive this. They had all right. Let me pause right here because this story is building to something incredible. If you've been with Darnell and Keisha from the beginning, you know these two don't give up easily. But what happens next is going to test them in ways they never expected. Make sure you're subscribed and notifications are on. And drop a comment telling me which baby is your favorite so far. Zora the boss, Simone the old soul, or Elijah the escape artist. Now let's keep going. Help arrived in the form of Miss Ernestine. Ernestine Palmer was a 67-year-old retired daycare owner from Decatur who had raised 4 children of her own and helped raise about 200 others. She was built like a fire hydrant, spoke with the authority of a 4-star general, and had absolutely zero tolerance for nonsense. Darnell found her through a recommendation from one of the nurses at the hospital. She showed up for her interview wearing a church hat and carrying a casserole dish. I brought dinner, she said, pushing past Darnell into the house. Baked chicken, collard greens, and cornbread. Your wife looks like she hasn't had a decent meal in weeks. Where are my babies? Your bobbies, Darnell blinked. Any child under my care is my baby. That's rule number 1. Now show me the nursery. 20 minutes, Miss Ernestine had assessed the entire situation. She reorganized the nursery, established a feeding schedule, demonstrated a swaddling technique that actually kept Elijah contained, and got all 3 bobbies sleeping at the same time. Darnell and Keisha stood in the hallway outside the nursery, staring at each other in stunned silence. That woman just do in 20 minutes what we haven't been able to do in a week, Darnell whispered. She's a witch, Keisha whispered back. A beautiful casserole-bringing witch. I heard that, Miss Ernestine called from the nursery. And I'm not a witch, I'm experienced. There's a difference. Now both of you go eat that chicken before it gets cold. I've got things handled in here. They ate the chicken. It was the best meal either of them had tasted in weeks, maybe months. We're hearing her, Keisha said with her mouth full. Whatever she's charging, we're hearing her. Already done. Darnell took another piece of cornbread. She starts Monday. 5 days a week, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Can she start tomorrow? She already did. She told me she's not leaving until the bobbies have their next feeding. Keisha set down her fork and looked at her husband. We're going to make it, aren't we? We're going to more than make it. Darnell reached across the table and took her hand. We're going to thrive. Miss Ernestine's help, life slowly found a rhythm. The bobbies grew. Day by day, ounce by ounce, they got stronger. Zora's personality came in like a thunderstorm. By 2 months, she had perfected a cry that could shatter glass and a smile that could light up a stadium. She demanded to be held facing outward, always watching, always studying, always processing. Keisha said she was going to be a lawyer or a journalist or a politician, someone who asked tough questions and didn't accept easy answers. Simone remained the calm center of the storm. She watched her siblings with those wide, knowing eyes and rarely fussed unless she was genuinely hungry or uncomfortable. She was the first to sleep through the night, the first to smile at a stranger, the first to reach for her mother's face with tiny, gentle fingers. Darnell said she was going to be a healer, a teacher, someone who made the world softer just by being in it. Elijah was chaos in human form. By 3 months, he was rolling over. By 4 months, he was attempting to crawl. By 5 months, the pediatrician was shaking her head in amazement. This child has somewhere to be, Dr. Patterson laughed during a checkup. He's hitting milestones early across the board. Tried to climb out of his crib last week, Darnell said wearily. He's 5 months old. How does a 5-month-old try to climb out of a crib? You'd be surprised what determined bobbies can do. Darnell was not surprised. He'd been chasing Elijah since the day he was born. Sometimes literally, as the boy found new and creative ways to wiggle out of every containment device known to modern parenting. He's going to be an athlete, Aunt predicted during one of his visits. Or an escape artist, or a professional troublemaker. He's already a professional troublemaker, Darnell said, fishing Elijah out from under the coffee table for the 3rd time that afternoon. At 6 months, something shifted. The bobbies had a routine. Miss Ernestine had the daytime covered. Darnell and Keisha had mastered the nighttime schedule. Things were hard, yes, exhausting, always, but manageable, finally manageable, and Keisha started getting restless. Darnell noticed it first. The way she'd stare at the basement door when she thought no one was watching. The way her fingers would move unconsciously, shaping invisible forms in the air. The way she'd flip through art magazines and trace her fingertips over photographs of sculptures. One evening, after all three bobbies were down and Miss Ernestine had gone home, Darnell found Keisha sitting at the top of the basement stairs, just sitting there, staring down into the darkness. Darnell said from behind her. Keisha jumped. "What? Go down there, work on the sculpture. The bobbies are asleep. I'll handle anything that comes up." "Darnell, I can't just—" "Yes, you can." He sat down beside her on the top step. "Keisha, I've watched you stare at that door for weeks. You're an artist. Your art is calling you. Go answer it. The babies have a father who is perfectly capable of handling bedtime duties solo." Darnell bumped her shoulder with his. "Give me some credit. I'm not completely useless." "Not useless at all." Keisha smiled. "You're the best father I've ever seen. Then trust me with our kids for a couple hours and go finish what you started." Keisha looked at the basement door, then at Darnell, then back at the door. "Maybe just an hour," she said slowly. "Take as long as you need." Keisha stood. She walked down the stairs into the basement. Darnell heard the work lights click on, heard the sound of tools being arranged, heard a long, deep exhale, the kind of breath someone takes when they finally come home after being away too long, then silence, then the sound of metal on stone. Darnell smiled and closed the basement door gently behind her. No lock this time. Keisha worked on the sculpture for 2 hours that first night. When she came upstairs, her eyes were red from concentration and her hands were covered in stone dust. But she was glowing, radiating something that had been missing for months, maybe years. "How does it feel?" Darnell asked from the couch where he'd been watching highlights on his phone. "Like breathing," Keisha said. "Like I've been underwater for years and I finally broke the surface." "Good, better." She sat beside him, tucking her dusty hands under her legs. "I finished Zora's face tonight, on the sculpture." "How does it look?" "Like her." Keisha's voice was soft with wonder. "The face I carved months ago before I even knew I was pregnant. It looks exactly like Zora, the expression, the intensity, the way she looks at the world like she's ready to challenge it." Darnell felt goosebumps rise on his arms. "What about Simone and Elijah?" "I'll work on them next." "But Darnell, it's strange." Keisha turned to face him. "When I was carving these faces months ago, I was working from feeling, from instinct. I didn't know what our children would look like. I didn't even know they existed yet. But the faces I carved, the expressions I gave them, the personalities I sculpted into stone, they match. They actually match our real children." "How is that possible?" "I don't know." Keisha's voice was barely a whisper. "Maybe some things are decided before we get a say. Maybe these children were always coming to us. Maybe my hands knew what my mind didn't." They sat in silence for a long moment, both of them thinking about the strangeness and beauty of what was unfolding in their lives. "Or maybe," Darnell said finally, "you're just that talented." Keisha punched his arm lightly. "I'm being serious." "So am I." Darnell took her dusty hand in his. "You created something extraordinary, Keisha. Before we even knew these bobbies were on the way, you carved their faces in stone. Whether that's destiny or talent or some combination of both, it's remarkable. You're remarkable." Keisha leaned into him. "I want to show people." "Show people what?" "The sculpture, my work. I want people to see what I can do." She hesitated. "Is that selfish? With 3 bobbies to take care of, is it selfish to want something for myself?" "It's the opposite of selfish." Darnell pulled her close. "Our children are going to grow up watching their mother pursue her passion. They're going to learn that being a parent doesn't mean giving up who you are. It means becoming more of who you are." "When did you become a philosopher?" "I told you. The shower. Great ideas come to me in the shower." "Now listen, I need to pause here because what's about to happen next is something truly special. This is the part of the story where everything comes full circle. But before we get there, take a quick second to like this video. I know I ask a lot, but that little thumbs up makes a huge difference. It tells the algorithm to show this story to more people who need to hear it. And trust me, the ending of this story is one that everyone needs to hear. Now let's finish this journey together over the next few months. Keisha worked on the sculpture whenever she could. Some nights it was 2 hours. Some nights it was 30 minutes. Some nights the bobbies needed her and she didn't make it downstairs at all. But slowly, steadily, the piece came together. She finished Simone's face on a Tuesday night in February. Gentle and serene, with eyes that seemed to hold wisdom beyond their years. just like the real Simone, who had started reaching for her mother's face every morning with soft, deliberate touches, as if memorizing the landscape of the person she loved most. She finished Elijah's face on a Saturday afternoon while the Bobbies napped and Darnell handled grocery shopping. Bold and determined, with a mouth that curved upward at the corners like he was already planning his next adventure. Just like the real Elijah, who had started pulling himself up on furniture at 7 months and showed no signs of slowing down. The day Keisha declared the sculpture complete, she called Darnell down to the basement. He descended the stairs and stopped at the bottom, staring. The sculpture was transformed. The two central figures, man and woman embracing, had been refined and polished until the stone seemed to breathe. Every detail was precise. The man's strong hands, the woman's graceful neck. The way their bodies curved together, two halves of a single whole, and the children, the three small figures reaching upward now had faces. Zora fierce and curious, Simone calm and knowing, Elijah brave and restless. They looked exactly like the Bobbies sleeping upstairs, exactly. Darnell breathed. How did you do this before you even knew them? I told you. Keisha stood beside him, tears running down her face. I didn't do it. My hands did. Something moved through me when I was carving. Something that knew what I didn't know yet. Darnell walked slowly around the sculpture, studying every detail, and then he noticed something he'd never seen before. At the base of the sculpture, almost hidden in the rough stone, Keisha had carved words. Small letters, easy to miss if you weren't looking. Darnell knelt down and read them. Built on love, shaped by sacrifice, reaching for tomorrow. He looked up at Keisha. When did you add this? Last night. It came to me at 3 a.m. I came down here in my robe and carved it by flashlight. Old habits. Darnell smiled through his own tears. Old habits. Keisha smiled back. They stood together in the basement, looking at the sculpture that had started as a secret and become a prophecy. A woman's buried dream resurrected at midnight. A husband's patience rewarded beyond imagination. A family written in stone before it was written in flesh and blood. This needs to be seen, Darnell said firmly. Not just by us, by the world. Darnell, I'm serious, Keisha. This is museum-quality work. This is gallery-level art. People need to see this. I'm a self-taught sculptor who works in her basement at night. No gallery is going to take me seriously. Then we'll make them take you seriously. Darnell made some phone calls. He didn't know anything about the art world. Didn't know galleries from exhibitions from installations. But he knew how to research. He knew how to plan. And he knew how to fight for the people he loved. He called the High Museum of Art in Atlanta. Got transferred 4 times. Left 3 messages. Finally reached a curator named Vanessa Brooks who agreed to look at photographs of Keisha's work. He took the photos himself. Professional quality, different angles, different lighting, close-ups of the faces, wide shots of the full piece. He sent them to Vanessa on a Thursday morning. She called back Thursday afternoon. Mr. Washington, I need to see this piece in person. Really? Really. The emotional depth of this work is extraordinary. The technical skill is remarkable, especially for someone without formal training, and the story behind it. Vanessa paused. Your wife created this sculpture before she knew she was pregnant, and the children's faces match her actual babies. That's correct. This isn't just art, Mr. Washington. This is a phenomenon. When can I come see it? Vanessa Brooks arrived at their house on Saturday morning. She was a tall woman with silver locks and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She walked into the basement, took one look at the sculpture, and didn't speak for 5 full minutes. She circled it, touched it gently, knelt to read the inscription at the base, stood back and studied the children's faces. Then she looked at Keisha. Who taught you? Vanessa asked. Nobody. Keisha's voice was nervous. I mean, I experimented as a teenager, clay mostly, never stone until this piece. This is your first stone sculpture? Yes. Vanessa stared at her. Mrs. Washington, I've been curating art for 25 years. I've seen work from graduates of the finest art schools in the world, and I can tell you right now that very few of them could produce something with this level of emotional power and technical precision. So, you like it? Keisha asked hesitantly. Like it? Vanessa almost laughed. I want to feature it. The High Museum has an emerging artists program. We showcase new talent 4 times a year. I want this sculpture in our next exhibition. Keisha's mouth fell open. You're joking. Never joke about art. This piece tells a story that people need to hear. A story about dreams buried and resurrected. About love that creates before it understands why. About family that exists in the imagination before it exists in reality. Vanessa turned to Darnell. You must be incredibly proud of your wife. You have no idea, Darnell said. The exhibition opened on a warm Friday evening in April. The High Museum was packed. Art lovers, critics, collectors, and curious strangers filled the gallery, wandering from piece to piece, but the crowd was thickest around Keisha's sculpture. It stood in the center of the main gallery, lit from above by soft white lights that made the stone seem to glow. The two figures embracing, the three children reaching upward, the inscription at the base, built on love, shaped by sacrifice, reaching for tomorrow. Keisha stood beside it, wearing a deep green dress that Darnell had bought her for the occasion. She was shaking with nerves. "Everyone's staring at it," she whispered to Darnell, "because it's incredible. Because it's terrible and they're trying to figure out what it's supposed to be. Keisha, look at their faces." She looked. People were standing in front of the sculpture with tears in their eyes. A young woman pressed her hand to her heart and turned to her companion, whispering something Keisha couldn't hear. An older man in a suit wiped his eyes with a handkerchief. A couple held each other in front of the piece, clearly moved by the image of family and love it portrayed. "They feel it," Darnell said softly. "They feel what you put into it." Keisha's mother Dorothy was there, standing at the back of the gallery, crying quietly into a tissue. When Keisha caught her eye, Dorothy pressed her hand to her lips and nodded, a gesture that said everything. "I'm proud of you. I'm sorry I didn't fight for you sooner. But look at you now." Lorraine Washington was there too, of course. Darnell's mother had dressed up like she was going to the Grammys, wearing her finest church hat and telling anyone who would listen that her daughter-in-law was a genius. "That's my son's wife," she announced to a startled art critic. "She made that whole sculpture in her basement while she was pregnant with my grandbabies. 3 of them, triplets. You want to see pictures?" "Mama, please," Darnell groaned. "What? I'm networking. That's what they do at these things, right? Network." Aunt was there too, standing in front of the sculpture with his arms crossed, studying it like it was a puzzle he was trying to solve. "I can't believe this is what she was doing," he said to Darnell. "All those weeks, all that worrying, and she was making this. Yeah, it's beautiful, man, like genuinely beautiful." Aunt shook his head. "I feel bad for all those things I said about her sneaking around, about her hiding things. You were looking out for me. I was being paranoid. There's a difference." "There," Darnell smiled. "Shut up." Aunt punched his arm. "I'm trying to be sincere." As the evening went on, a tall man in an expensive gray suit approached Keisha. He introduced himself as Raymond Ellis, a private art collector from New York. "Mrs. Washington, I've been standing in front of your sculpture for 30 minutes, he said. "I can't stop looking at it." "Thank you," Keisha blushed. "That means a lot." "I'd like to buy it." Keisha blinked. "I'm sorry. I'd like to purchase the sculpture for my collection. I'm prepared to offer you $40,000. Number hung in the air. Keisha looked at Darnell. He raised his eyebrows. $40,000 for a piece she'd created in their basement in the middle of the night. "Mr. Ellis," Keisha said slowly, "I'm incredibly flattered, and $40,000 is more money than I ever imagined anyone would pay for something I made. This sculpture isn't for sale." Raymond Ellis tilted his head. "Mrs. Washington, I collect art from emerging artists all over the world. I don't make offers like this lightly. Are you certain?" "Certain." Keisha looked at the sculpture, at the 2 figures embracing, at the 3 children reaching for the sky. "This piece was made for my family. It has our story carved into every surface, our love, our struggle, our children. I can't put a price on that." Raymond Ellis studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Respect that enormously." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. "But when you create your next piece, and I have no doubt you will, please call me first." Keisha took the card with trembling fingers. "I will." After Raymond Ellis walked away, Keisha turned to Darnell. "Did I just turn down $40,000? "You did." "I crazy?" "Absolutely." Darnell grinned. "But you're also right. That sculpture belongs in our home. Our children need to grow up seeing it every day. They need to know their story." "What story?" "The story of a mother who dreamed them into existence before she even knew they were coming. The story of a father who almost lost his mind worrying about his wife but loved her enough to wait. The story of a family that was written in stone before it was written in blood." Keisha's eyes filled with tears. "You really did practice that in the shower, didn't you?" "Been working on that one for weeks." They both laughed. And in that laughter, standing in a gallery surrounded by strangers who had been moved to tears by their family's story, something clicked into place, everything they'd been through. The midnight disappearances, the locked doors, the fear and suspicion and doubt, the pregnancy, the complications, the terrifying delivery. The sleepless nights and overwhelming days, all of it had led here, to this moment, to this sculpture, to this family. They brought the sculpture home the following week. Darnell built a custom platform for it in their living room, right where everyone could see it the moment they walked through the door. He installed special lighting, positioned it so the morning sun would hit the children's faces first. On the day they placed the sculpture in its permanent home, something happened that none of them expected. Keisha was holding Zora in one arm. Darnell had Elijah on his hip. Miss Ernestine was bouncing Simone gently by the window. Zora, now 8 months old and opinionated as ever, caught sight of the sculpture from across the room. Her little body went rigid. Her dark eyes widened. She pointed one chubby finger at the stone children and made a sound. Not a cry, not a babble. Something almost like recognition. Then she looked at Keisha, looked back at the sculpture, looked at Keisha again, and smiled, a huge, gummy, radiant smile. "She knows," Keisha whispered. "Darnell, she knows that's her. She's 8 months old. She doesn't know anything." At her face, she knows. Darnell looked at his daughter, at the way her eyes kept moving between the stone child and her own reflection in the window, at the way she kept pointing and smiling, pointing and smiling. Maybe Keisha was right. Maybe Zora did know. Maybe on some level deeper than logic, deeper than age or understanding, his daughter recognized herself in the stone face her mother had carved months before she was born. Or maybe she just liked the shiny thing. Either way, it was perfect. 6 months later, Keisha's second sculpture was featured in an exhibition in New York. She called Raymond Ellis first, just as she'd promised. He bought the piece before the show even opened. This time, Keisha accepted the money, because this piece wasn't about their family. It was about something bigger, something universal. She called it Rising. It depicted a woman emerging from rough, uncut stone, her upper body fully formed and reaching upward while her lower half remained trapped in the raw material. It was about every person who had ever felt stuck, every dreamer who had ever been told their dreams weren't practical, every woman who had ever been told to sit down, be quiet, and be sensible. The art world took notice. A review in a major magazine called Keisha's work emotionally devastating in the best possible way. A prominent art blog named her one of the top emerging sculptors to watch. 3 more collectors reached out. 2 galleries invited her to show. Keisha read the reviews sitting on the floor of their living room while the triplets crawled around her legs, and Miss Ernestine made lunch in the kitchen, and Darnell stood behind her reading over her shoulder. "Top emerging sculptor to watch," Darnell read aloud. "Look at that, baby. You're emerging." "Been emerging for about 30 years, Keisha laughed. "I'm the slowest emerging artist in history." "You're right on time." Darnell knelt down beside her. Everything happened exactly when it was supposed to. Elijah chose that moment to pull himself up using Darnell's shoulder, wobble for 3 seconds, and take his first unassisted step. Everyone froze. Elijah stood there, swaying slightly, his face scrunched with concentration. Then he took another step, and fell directly into the sculpture's base with a soft thud. He looked up at the stone children above him, reached his small hand toward the figure that bore his face, and laughed. "This boy is going to be the death of me," Darnell said, scooping him up. "He's going to be the life of you," Keisha corrected, kissing Elijah's forehead. On the night of their 11th wedding anniversary, 1 year after the midnight mystery began, Darnell and Keisha stood together in front of the sculpture. The Bobbies were asleep. Miss Ernestine had gone home. The house was quiet for the first time all day. "1 year ago tonight," Keisha said softly, "I was sneaking down to the basement, terrified you'd find out what I was doing." "Year ago tonight," Darnell replied, "I was lying in bed convinced my marriage was falling apart. Instead, everything fell together." Keisha reached for his hand. He took it. "Been thinking about something," she said. "That's never good," she smiled. "I've been thinking about what I'd tell our children someday. When they're old enough to understand this story, about the sculpture and the midnight sessions and how scared we both were. What would you tell them?" Keisha looked at the 3 small figures reaching upward in the stone. Her children, predicted in art before they existed in flesh. "I tell them that the most important things in life usually start in the dark, in basements and locked rooms and places nobody else can see. I tell them that the people who love us deserve our trust, even when we're too scared to explain what we're doing. I tell them that dreams don't die just because someone tells them to. They go underground. They hibernate. When we're ready, they come back stronger than ever." She paused. "And I tell them that their father is the bravest man I've ever known, not because he never felt afraid, but because he felt afraid every single night and still chose to trust me, still chose to wait, still chose love over suspicion. Darnell's throat was tight. I'd tell them their mother is the most talented, stubborn, beautiful woman on the planet, a woman who carved their faces in stone before she even knew they were coming. A woman who refused to give up on her dream even after the whole world told her it wasn't worth pursuing. Sound like a greeting card. Greeting card ever written. They laughed. Then they held each other in front of the sculpture, two figures embracing just like the ones in the stone. Two people who had weathered midnight mysteries and locked doors and fear and doubt and come out the other side stronger. Behind them, the inscription at the base of the sculpture glowed softly in the lamplight, built on love. Shaped by sacrifice, reaching for tomorrow, upstairs 3 Bobbies slept peacefully in their cribs, 3 miracles predicted by a mother's hands before her mind caught up. 3 lives that existed in stone before they existed in the world, and somewhere in the basement a work light still burned. New tools laid out on the table. Fresh stone waiting to be shaped, because Keisha Washington wasn't finished creating. She was just getting started now. Listen. This is where the story ends, but the lesson is just beginning. Sometimes the people who love us keep secrets, not because they're hiding something bad, but because they're building something beautiful, something they're not ready to show until it's complete. And sometimes the hardest thing in the world isn't finding out the truth. It's having the patience to wait for it. Darnell could have broken down that door any night, could have demanded answers, could have let suspicion destroy what trust had built over 10 years, but he didn't. He waited. He trusted. He chose love over fear, and what he found on the other side of that locked door wasn't betrayal. It was beauty. It was family. It was a future he never could have imagined. So the next time someone you love asks you to trust them, even when everything inside you is screaming for answers, maybe try waiting. Maybe try trusting. Maybe the secret they're keeping isn't a wound. Maybe it's a gift that hasn't finished being made yet. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this journey with Darnell and Keisha and Zora and Simone and Elijah. This story started with a locked door and ended with an open heart, and I hope it opened something in you too. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't already. And remember, the most beautiful things in life are often built in the dark by hands that know what the heart hasn't figured out yet. Until next time, take care of each other.